You know that feeling when you grab a cheap pump off the shelf, set it up in the basement, and 2 weeks later you're knee-deep in a backed-up mess because the motor quit on you. I've been there, and I've also seen a lot of folks hesitate because the price tag on a heavy-duty sewage pump can feel like a gamble. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The question is whether spending a bit more on a solid-built unit actually saves you from that regret, or if you're just paying for a brand name. When I started looking at sewage pumps for a friend's older home renovation, I mapped out the typical failure points: corrosion from wet waste, motor overheating, and the dreaded seal leak that turns a small backup into a flood. Most low-cost models rely on thin-walled housings and plastic seals that can't take continuous duty. That's why the HP 2HP sewage pump caught my eye. It's marketed as a continuous duty, double-seal machine with a cast-iron base and a powder-coated epoxy finish that promises to shrug off rust. I dug into the specs, read the few comments that were available, and even watched a couple of installation videos to see how it behaves in a real basement. First off, the build feels different the moment you pull the pump out of the box. The cast-iron base is heavy enough that you need a second pair of hands to set it down, which is a good sign that the chassis isn't a flimsy plastic shell. The powder-coated epoxy finish on the housing is something you normally see on industrial equipment, not a consumer-grade pump, so it's designed to keep rust at bay even if the pump sits in wet conditions for months. The motor itself is oil-filled and hermetically sealed, which means there's a layer of oil inside the motor that lubricates the windings and keeps moisture out, a feature you'd expect in a pump that's supposed to run continuously without blowing a gasket. Installation is where the practical design choices become clear. The stainless steel handle is long enough to give you leverage when you need to lift the pump out of a pit, and because it's stainless, it won't corrode the same way a painted metal handle might after years of exposure to sewage water. The screws, washers, and the whole seal assembly are also stainless steel, which reduces the chance that a rusted bolt will seize and make removal a nightmare. When you're pulling the pump out for routine maintenance, those stainless components stay tight, but don't become stuck. The pump's 3-inch discharge is a sweet spot for most residential setups. It matches the standard pipe sizes you'll find in a typical home's drainage system, so you don't have to hunt for adapters or do custom welding. The 25-foot cord is long enough to reach a wall outlet without having to stretch an extension, which is a subtle convenience that often gets overlooked in product descriptions. The single-phase capacitor start is a simple, reliable way to get the motor moving, and it avoids the more complex 3-phase wiring that can be a headache for DIY installers. Now, let's talk about how it actually performs when it's running. In a test run with a 10-gallon bucket of water mixed with a bit of garden debris, to simulate a semi-solid waste stream, the pump lifted the load without stalling. The motor stayed cool to the touch after about 30 minutes of continuous operation, which lines up with the continuous duty claim. Because the motor is double-sealed, there was no sign of water leaking into the electrical compartment, a common failure point on cheaper units. The flow felt steady, and the discharge pipe didn't chatter, which is a sign that the impeller is well balanced. That said, the pump isn't a miracle solution for every scenario. It's rated for 208-230V, so you need a compatible outlet. Trying to run it on a standard 120V line will either not start, or will overheat quickly. The 2 HP motor is powerful, but it also draws a noticeable amount of current, so if your home circuit is already near its limit, you could trip a breaker during a heavy pump down. The manual start means there's no built-in automatic float switch. You have to pair it with an external controller if you want the pump to turn on automatically when water reaches a certain level. For a homeowner who expects a Satan-forget solution, that adds a small extra cost and a bit of wiring work. Who should consider buying this pump? If you're a DIY renovator working on a basement that will see regular water discharge, think a sump pit, a laundry area, or a secondary drainage line, the HP unit gives you the durability and corrosion resistance that cheap pumps lack. It's also a solid pick for small commercial properties where the pump might run for hours at a time, such as a restaurant kitchen's grease interceptor, or a workshop that generates a lot of wash water. The heavy-duty construction justifies the higher price tag when the cost of a failed pump would be